Well, I have to wait till you go live so I can click on it.
Hello, Facebook family. January 19th, Wednesday. Elevate Facebook Live episode 27. Interview with a successful business leader, R.D. Martin. I see we have someone on already. Hello. So we're going to get started with our and if you can just post who you are and what city you're in. It's always interesting to see the city. I know today is we're excited because we have better technology, so I'm feeling pretty strong right now. Uh, don't have to hold two phones, so this is great. Shar did a great job. Uh, Rick Torres. Oh, I'm assuming that's a friend of yours, RD. Rick Torres.
Oh, Rick Torres, yeah.
Yeah, he's
From
on.
Austin Sonics.
Yeah, he said from the MHR family. Awesome. So welcome, Rick. We appreciate you coming on. So just to let everybody know, I'm Curtis Carr. I'm the founder of E.L.E.V.A.T.E. It's a leadership consulting company. Char and my wife are the leaders of this company. I have over 30 years of leadership experience, 15 with direct training. Char is a project manager and a computer analyst, and also has her own company. So she's been doing that, her own company, for over 8 years, and the project analyst, project manager, and business analyst for over 8 years. Over 10 years. So you would think after 28 weeks of reading this, I would have it down. I still have to look down at my notes. So I just wanted to really give a shout out to our supporters for their patience last week. Definitely want to give a shout out to Shar for finding the solution the same night. And we were able to test it and move forward with it. And then with RD being patient with us during our first interview with him, um, definitely, that's why I tell people that's why we'll have a successful company, because we have that kind of mindset to overcome those challenges and to keep it moving. So, I also want to just highlight our focus. Who else we got on? I see. I never get to see the names, but I do just see the number. So I just wanted to. I see Rick Torres on, and everybody else can chime in. It'd be great to see the names. Rick, normally we do the cities also. So if you can chime in on what city you're from, Rick, that'd be great. We're here in Houston, my wife and I, actually a little city. Ann, nice to see you. Nice to see you, Ann. We're in a little city called Rosenberg, right outside of Houston. Linda, it's great to see you. So we got Texas A&M represented, College Station. And then we have San Antonio represented. That's great to see. So our focus at this time is the 99 group coaching. The group coaching is when you break it down, it's only $3.25 a day. We always tell people be intentional, focus on growth, and elevate now. Basically, what we do is we meet once a week, and we're looking for different groups. So we have the group of people that maybe they have personal career goals, and they're trying to reach them, and they're struggling. Maybe you started, and then maybe you've had a New Year's resolution, and you already find yourself a little off track. It's a good place to start with us. We have platinum packages, and we also have private coaching packages. But if you say, hey, those are a little out of reach, we could always start off with the 99 group coaching. So, our belief is that you should always have a coach and a challenger in your life. Always have a coach and a challenger. And we describe a coach as somebody that's maybe older and more paternal or maternal. Then challenger is more of a big brother or big sister. But those people are people that'll help move you towards your goal. When we have a hey, Aunt Stephanie, it's great to see you. It's Pflugerville represented. So, but those most people, when you talk to them, when they are struggling, they just don't have the right people around them a lot of times. So, coaching, we can be that coach for you. We have to encourage you to find a challenger, though, but we can be that coach for you. So also we look for youth and college students that are looking to get ahead. Maybe you're struggling with time management, struggling with being overwhelmed, feel like it's impossible. I remember a long time ago, a person told me a whole bunch of stuff to do. And my response was, hey, that just seems impossible. You're asking me to do the impossible. And they looked at me and said, Curtis, your job is to do the impossible. Your job is to make the impossible possible. That's how they said it. And then it forced me to start thinking. And then when I started thinking, I found out that it really wasn't impossible. So maybe you're a new and existing leader with a strong desire to increase your efficiencies and your effectiveness. We can definitely work with you. We definitely have different packages for that group too. We also do some business coaching for entrepreneurs that are trying to become entrepreneurs, or maybe you have a small business and you're struggling to scale that business. But at the end of the day, group coaching is a great place to start. So we got everybody. We got a few people on. How you guys feeling out there? If we can say it in one word, I would say excited. That would be the word I would say. If I could say it in one word. If we can get some feedback out there, how do you can start off, RD? How you feeling today?
Excited.
All right. RD is such an easy interview. You know, he just works with me, so I really appreciate that. I also wanted to just kind of explain how we conduct our Facebook. What we do is we depend on your comments. We really depend on your comments. I try to stop and I try to address every comment that comes across the screen, and then we try to end properly. We started early today, just because I felt like we left something on the board last week, just because of all the challenges we're having. But Ann says she's excited. She really enjoyed last week. So Ann is one of our first people that joined the Facebook Lives, and she's been. I think you missed one. I think, and if it was that, so it's just great. We always see Ann, and we appreciate the support. We actually went out and visit Ann and her sister Karen. So Stephanie says hopeful. So Aunt Stephanie, appreciate it. So today, of course, we're going to have the interview with RD, and we're going to focus today on relationships, a little bit about the health. Of course, RD, whenever you feel like chiming in on something, if I don't address it and you want to, put something on the table, just let me know. I'll stop. We don't have to go straight by these questions, but
Will do.
definitely. But we always do. We have one tradition here at Facebook Live, Elevate, and it's the jokes. One tradition, it's the jokes. So I get excited about these because I think they're hilarious. But everybody don't always think so. So, but the first joke, before we get into the interview, the first joke. What did the house say when it tripped? What did the house say when it tripped? Char? RD, any thoughts?
No, I'm just excited. Let's hear it.
Help! You know what? I done messed up the joke. What did the horse say? This is what happens when you have bad handwriting. What did the horse say when it tripped? Help! I've fallen. I can't get it up. You get it?
Oh no.
It would have been better if I would have read it the first time right. It would have been better. Number 2. When we mess up, we just keep it moving. Why can't you give Elsa from Frozen a balloon? Why can't you give Elsa from Frozen a balloon? Char? Char's like looking at her computer. Because she will let it go. Let it go. You get it?
I don't get that one.
She anyway, Tamika's on. Hey, good to see you, Tamika. She said hilarious, but she shook her head. So I don't know how to take that, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to take it as a compliment. All right. Third joke. What happens if you eat yeast and shoe polish? Do you remember this one, John? What happens if you eat yeast and shoe polish? Every morning you rise and you shine.
That's a good
one. Stephanie said, what? Awful. She said awful. So, but we got one giggle. We got one person said one was good. So what we do is we keep it rolling another week.
All right. Rebecca says because she would let it go for Elsa.
Well, who did?
Rick.
Rick. Good job, Rick. Good job, Rick. So, like today, I said we're going to focus on. Aunt Linda said A+. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. I get the nephew favoritism here, so appreciate it. But like we said today, we're going to focus on relationships. If you guys do have questions, you can always chime in. I will try to answer the questions, or I definitely will try to read every comment that comes across the screen. Somebody said RD was smart. He didn't respond. I will see you later, Aunt Stephanie. So anyway,
I mean, like that.
but I really appreciate RD coming on. I just want to share a little bit of the history. When I was 19, I worked under RD for several years and learned a lot. He was easy to connect to. He was easy as far as understanding what he expected. Um, he was very clear on his instructions, and it was definitely hands down the best supervisor I ever worked for up to this date. I've worked with some great guys, but I think the thing that makes RD different is that he makes it look easy, and the amount of weight he can carry. Because I was a young kid. I was very zealous, and I thought that running these little Sonics is nothing is easy. I was an assistant. I was like, we do all the work anyway. And then I got a store, and man, I almost had a heart attack. So I mean, very stressful. I didn't understand that how to maximize my team. I didn't understand how to give clear expectations. I was just a worker bee, just running around working. So learned a lot under RD. I think I probably should have went to San Antonio with you. Something I always think about sometimes. Said, man, that would have been a great move. But it's a little bit past that now, about 20 years or 30 years past that. So
You're doing okay.
But at the end of the day, I really wanted to hear your perspective on some relationship issues. Last week, you really shared a lot from a business standpoint. I wanted to give a quick overview, real quick, since it's 6:57. I wrote some things down. I just wanted to overview a couple things that you said last week that was very impactful. You said you define leadership as the ability to positively influence the behaviors of others, to be able to get others to come along with you. They want to come with you. One question I wanted to add to that is that I remember when you went to Phoenix, and then I'll get back to the recap. But when you went to Phoenix, I remember a lot of managers leaving. Did you ever count how many managers went with you to Phoenix between the Austin and San Antonio market?
Oh gosh, I didn't. I mean, for the most part, I try to discourage them from coming. I thought they were. I thought it was important that people didn't associate their success and happiness and well-being just with me, and and they still had pretty good opportunity where they were. Of course, everybody's got to, like we said, everybody's got to find their happy place. But so I think at the peak, it was probably a dozen or so.
Yeah,
and it's a pretty big move, to go 1,200 miles and into a city you've never lived in, or probably in most situations never been in, and in a growing market too. It just wasn't particularly stable, or financially. And when you're in this type of business, where your income is result based, where you're going to a market, a struggling market that's not established, that's a big risk.
Right. I knew it was a lot. It just seems, when you're in the moment, it seemed like everybody left.
Yeah, I was appreciative of everyone, though. That's for dang sure.
Right. Barbara, good to see you on. Appreciate you. Now, going back over the recap, another thing you said, he said you often share with your leaders how to see the world. This is the one that I always take away. You said you tell your leaders to see the world as a sausage eater and not as a sausage maker. And people need to go back and look at that last video, because I'm not going to do it justice. But basically, your point was it's an ugly process when you make sausage, but sausages are delicious if you're an eater. So it's best to look at as a leader, it's best to look at your people, and the result be more of a result of what did you say? How you put it? You said look at the product
Yeah,
instead
you
of the
should. Yeah, focus more on the product and less on the process.
right.
The
My
process is
parents are on.
ugly, but the product is delicious.
Right, right. My parents are on. Good to see you, mom and dad. Quick, my mom's birthday is today. I
Yeah,
know. Happy birthday, mom. So I know they're still celebrating. They had a party last Saturday. It was a great time. And then of course you're celebrating the official day today. So happy birthday. Another thing you said was about accountability and how accountability kind of takes care of itself in some ways if the expectations are clear. It enables people to become more self-directed, and you don't have to hold them by the hand and tell them every step. Um, I think that's why a lot of times we struggle. Let me see this real quick. Um, and then another item you had on here was about how you started running. I thought that was very interesting. You started running because Bobby was having some issues health wise, and you wanted to support him. And I mean that's a true friend. So I thought that was very powerful.
yeah. Although that was more of he was trying to prevent health issues, losing
Okay,
weight, and then so I wanted to be supportive. Still,
got you, got you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump to the relationship questions, and the first one I have for you, RD, is early on. What was you and Eva's biggest challenges early on? Young married couple, the stresses of running a store, and then eventually you got promoted to a supervisory position. Well, what were some of the challenges early on?
so I mean, definitely the life balance. I mean, I'm not I'm not always, to be truthful, I'm not always the best example of, how to be you know, uh, I'm not the best example of how to keep your life balanced. I've certainly, teetered back and forth, and I think some of that, the life balance, and when you're not at work, you only have so much time, and so when you're not at work, being at home and making that time count. And I probably wasn't the best at that. And then I think most people, the financial challenges that come that young couples have, and I think some of that comes from just I don't really have this issue as much anymore, but it's not necessarily because I made a ton of money. That's for sure. It has more to do with I just don't value money for money's sake. And I think it's easy when you're younger. Everybody's got that magical number in their head. It's like, oh, I've got to make this much money. They equate that whatever sum of money with being successful, and at the end of the day, you just don't find many people that are happy, in their personal or professional life when success is only equated with a particular dollar amount, or a particular income. And I think once I let that kind of wash away, I was probably a easier, happier person to be around. So, and that was really on me, just trying to get those preconceived ideas out of my head in terms of what type of money, what type of income, you had to be successful. And, I mean, I'd rather have money than not have it. That's for sure. But it's not the only thing.
Right,
So
I got you. Did you ever have a negative experience because Eva's Latina and you're a white guy?
no,
How'd you like
yeah,
that?
I think that I don't think about that, because I mean, truthfully, I just don't care. I wouldn't care what somebody thought, when I married Eva, I didn't marry the rest of the world. And so our relationships between us, and she would, pretty much be the same way. It's like somebody's thought or their thoughts on our relationship. We didn't, it wasn't, I didn't care, so what? They think what they want. It's not going to really change anything that we do, or it's not certainly not going to change who we are. So, again, you gotta get past some of that. And
Right.
I just don't allow myself to be, and Eva doesn't either. we just don't allow ourselves to be influenced by things beyond our realm of control. And I can't control what people think. So I don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't give it any weight in my life.
Gotcha. So, you know, in my mind, I was thinking, man, 30 years ago, it's trendy now, but 30 years ago, I don't think it was so much, you know? So I had to ask that question.
Right.
Had to ask that
Fair
question.
enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. So did you, let's see, why do you think you guys have lasted so long in this? I call it the divorce culture.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think, one, I think, we had a pretty good understanding, which is, you can't unsay things and you can't unhear things. And so from the very beginning, we were always particular about, what we said to each other. And, for that reason, I mean, we've been married 33 years and we've never really had a fight, in the 33 years. Part of that is, I'm sure some of that has to do a lot with me, just from the fact that I'm not a pleasant person. I don't speak well when I probably speak too well when I'm angry, and I'm always regretful. And so I just had to learn to not speak, when I'm angry. And because nothing comes out right, you don't say anything right, when you're angry, and you're usually
Right.
regretful. So we just try never to speak out of anger. And both of us have been really good about that. So, but there's just that really good understanding, and be careful what you say. You can't undo, and you can't unhear, and you can't unsay things once it's out there. So we just don't speak out of anger. So there's not crazy stuff out there that we have to go back and try to undo. We've just never
Right.
we've never had that issue.
That's awesome. Uh, that's a challenge because I know that's a challenge for like probably all relationships.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah,
Just to make sure you don't say things and because most of the time I know I'm not very emotional until I'm angry.
yeah,
And then
definitely. That's probably true for most people. And I learned the hard way because I think that's good advice at work too, right? You can't,
right.
and I had to learn it the hard way because I didn't follow that advice at work. And I can remember, I was that guy, at work where everybody liked him, but nobody wanted to, they liked me, but they didn't like working for me. I had probably the first 6 months I was, running a store, and then it just kind of hit me, and it's like, holy smokes, I'm that guy. And I thought, I don't want to be that person. And then and you just start playing mind games with yourself. I mean, you run it through your head. And I can remember at one point in time going, man, if somebody talked to my kid the way I've just spoken to somebody else's kid, man, I can't tell you that I wouldn't punch them in the nose for talking to my kid like that. And and then you realize, you have to start, coming to terms with the fact that, hey, they're it's just not appropriate, right? I mean, and so once I kind of had that epiphany, and the hard way, I just extended that to other aspects of my life. But I was not, before I was 23, 24 years old, I was not very good at that. If I thought it, boy, I said it. And I was pretty high energy in most situations. And you know how it is. You get going, the juices get flowing, and you can say some crazy stuff. So
Right.
that's the
You
older.
know, yeah, I've never met that side. So it's funny you say that. I never would
Yeah,
have thought you would have said that. I never met that side.
yeah, you'd
You know.
remember if you did.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so
Yeah, I would.
I try to keep that side hidden. So.
Right. As a father, what was your biggest challenge as a father? You said you got two boys. Of course,
Yeah,
they're older now.
I think being a dad is a lot like, man, my lighting is really bad. Sorry about that. I think
Sorry.
being a father, sometimes it's a lot like being, it's like being a boss. My two kids are 3 years apart, but they're totally opposite. And I think that I probably didn't do a good enough job of treating them separately. My older son is the naturally gifted one. He's the one that didn't really study for his SAT and was probably up till 2 o'clock the night before, and he got the highest SAT score of all his friends, and just things just kind of came easy to him. And and so my younger son, he had to work a lot harder. He had to work harder for his C's than my son had to work for his A's, by a lot. And I think just with my older son, probably, I would like to have recognized, sooner on um, that and just coached him. I wish I would have been a better, coach slash father and said, hey, when you get out of high school, life doesn't come at you that easy. Life isn't linear, right? I mean, it's not one issue and then, oh, you get to resolve that 100%. Oh, and then the next issue comes up and then you get to resolve that. Oh, and then the next issue, it's going to be, you're just going to be, it's going to be rapid fire, challenges in life. And at some point in time, that presents its own set of challenges. And, I wish I would have been more aware of that while they were younger. So, I mean, they know now, but I still do that. We talk all the time. And so, I'm still dad, and just because I think there's something I wish I would have said a couple of years ago, doesn't mean I don't say it today. We have the type of relationship that we can, we still have those talks. So.
Gotcha. Now you said, so my next question is going to be interesting because you said they're complete opposites. So how would each son describe you? Or how do you think that?
They would describe me similarly. I think, they would, they'd probably say calm, even keeled, um, probably pretty determined, strong-willed, opinionated, strongly opinionated, um, and I think they'd say good father.
Okay.
I hope my fingers are crossed. They'd say that.
Right. Well, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the thing I've never really thought about that before, actually, but I think their description of me would be almost identical.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. A while back, you posted a picture of Bobby, yourself, Bobby, and Wayne.
Yeah, yeah.
And on that caption, you stated you guys have been friends for over 40 years.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I was like, wow, how do you think those relationships have stood the test of time? Why they have?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. I think what it comes down to is, I think that saying that opposites attract. It's usually in reference, right, to relationships. The marriages and stuff. But what really attracts are shared values. And so when I come across somebody where I think we share values, there's a really good chance we're going to be friends, and we'll probably be friends for a long time. And I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to shared values, and in terms of just our outlook on life and our level of commitment and integrity, and we're similar in those ways. And I mean, I would say the same thing about my wife too. So we just share values, and so at that point, it's just kind of easy to connect at that point. So that's why I always, even with working with younger people, and I tell them, I said, hey, when you run across somebody and when you're working with somebody or just somebody in your life and you share values, that's gold. I mean, that's somebody that you want to have a relationship with, whether it's business and for sure in business, or personally, so so it's the values, shared values.
Mother Brenda said, sharing values is a beautiful thing and wonderful to recognize the differences in your kids. It was, with the kids stuff, of course I'm a father, so, I'm always thinking about that kind of stuff, the relationships. And, I know I haven't talked to you about that. So I said, man, it's a great time. Got him on the screen. He has to answer him, or I guess you can politely decline.
Yes, I could, but I wouldn't.
Right.
You know, hey,
Right.
I'm gonna move to better light.
Okay.
My light
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Yeah, oh yeah. That's a big difference. So, I know you're a reader, and I always like to, get readers' opinions when it comes to when people say, "Hey," what would you say to a person that say, "Hey, I'm just not a reader. You just don't understand." What would be your reply? Because I know you're an avid reader. What would you say to that person?
Well, I think then, golly, um, I get. I guess there's a few things nowadays. You don't really have to be a reader, right? Because you've got audiobooks. So, a lot of times I tell people, well, then listen. Listen to a book. You don't have to read it. Just listen to it on your way to work and on your way home, and you'll get the same value. But I think typically it comes down to you know you can you can only make decisions in your life based on what you know, right? And you make the best decisions you can based on the information that you have. If you do not if you are not constantly looking for more information, then there's a good chance you're as good as you're gonna get, and you're gonna have to learn. What you learn is gonna have to be through your own experiences, and which we just call the school of hard knocks, typically, or learning from life. And it's just a wise person learns from the successes of others. And there's no rule that says you have to learn everything the hard way, when you just don't have to. So just read, and it doesn't have to be stuff that you can get good information even from stuff that you disagree with, even if it from the context of you where you read something you don't like, and it's like, okay, well, I know I'm not going to do that, but so there's always something to pick up. Now I think you can, it's funny nowadays because there's so much internet activity, and like my older son, he's an article reader, and he knows a lot about a lot. But I know he's not a big, book reader, although we share books back and forth occasionally. And so, and my younger son's not a reader, and I tell him, I said you have to stop thinking of reading as punishment, and or a chore, and read stuff you like. It doesn't. There's no rule that says everything you read has to be nonfiction and really deep, and has to be involve big life lessons. Read a magazine. He's in the military. It's like, read military magazines. Read magazines on the Second Amendment. Read anything. Just put information in your head, and the more information you have, probably the better chances you have of making good life decisions.
Right. So Rick said here, I love reading. Reading has a lot that not only helped me through the struggles of life, but at the same time, it always less painful to learn from others' mistakes than doing the mistakes yourself.
Sure.
I know when I was coming up, my father, I'll never forget this, and I know he knows what I'm getting ready to say, but he looked at me and he says, son, there's two types of people in this world. It's the people that learn from other people's mistakes, and there's the people that learn from their own mistakes. And he says, unfortunately, you learn from your own. So I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I don't even know how old I was. Maybe he can chime in and say how old I was. I don't remember how old I was. But I tell you what, when I was in my 20s going through hell, I remember what he said.
Yeah.
I remember it.
That point of reference.
Yeah, point of reference.
Point
So
of
I'll never
reference.
forget that.
Yeah.
So, but it was funny because I was in a situation. I was just looking for a life. What do you call it? What do you call those things you throw them in the water? And you,
A life preserver.
yeah, a life preserver. So I was looking for a life preserver, and all I can remember is my dad said, "Read, boy, read." So
Yeah.
I just start reading books. That
Yeah.
was my life preserver. He said I was 12. I will never forget that. Oh, look at Ann said, "Great job, Dad." So I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. So uh, on in your personal life? What's on your well, let me stop one second. So what are you reading now? You have any books that you would say, hey, these are good reads for people that are future people that want to get into leadership or personal development? What
Well,
books would you put there?
I usually read themes, so right now, over the last 2 years, I've been almost strictly fiction. And so I have the Kindle Unlimited where, for $10 a month or $11 a month, you can read unlimited books off of the Kindle library. And and so I'll find an author, and they're usually cheap novels. So I'll find an author, maybe has like 10 books in the series, and then I'll just plow through them and I'll read one right after the other. But right now my reading theme is, nonfiction, and it's just really to decompress a little bit. And just because it's been such a busy 2 years, I've gone through a couple years where my theme was the classics, and so I read every classic, that I could, that was probably the best theme that I've had. And then I've definitely done the management stuff, and I think the thing that's interesting, this is kind of touches on the last question. So when I moved to Phoenix, this is funny. You can't, when you change jobs, in the back of your mind, there's kind of that deal where you're thinking, I'm gonna pick up at this job where I left off at the last job, and it just doesn't work that way, right? Every job has its own starting point. So when I got to Phoenix, when I got out here, I realized it's like, wow, I'm trying to talk to the Phoenix people like I was able to talk to people in San Antonio, but I had 10 plus years relationships with those people in San Antonio, and we had kind of learned together. We grew together. And so after I had been out here for about a year, I got to the point where I said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read all of those very basic management books, because I need to get my mind where their mind is, so that I can connect to them. So I went back and read 1 Minute Manager, 13 Fatal Errors that Managers Make, and some of the really small John Maxwell books. I read a few of those. He's got those real little ones like Ethics 101 and stuff like that. And so I thought, the issue, like when I got out here, I thought, well, the issue isn't them. The issue is me. I can't connect to them because I'm not syncing up with them, but it's my job to sync up with them because I'm the new person, And so, so at that point I thought, okay, I used reading to put myself more to get my thinking more closely aligned to where their thinking was, and then we could grow together from there. And then I never buy one book, so if I buy books like I still have it today on my bookshelf. I always have anywhere from, gosh, when I buy a copy of books, like the last one was The Power of Self-Esteem, so I bought like 6 of them, and so I keep them in my office, and then I'll give them out. But I usually buy 10 to 12 books at a time. Sometimes I'll buy 30, and I'll keep them in my office. So when I'm talking to somebody that I think, oh, they're at this spot in life, and I can just reach in there and give them one of the books. And I just have one rule: if you like it, if you liked it and it added value, pass it on. And
Right.
so in some of the stores you can go into and you can see, some of the, like, especially 1 Minute Manager, you can see that copy sitting in the shelf, and everybody tries to sign it, when they read it. There's 10 signatures in it,
Awesome.
but yeah, so that's kind of a good thing. A good thing about reading is that, so I was able to do that, just because I'm a reader, I was able to, kind of put myself in a better position to be more successful in Phoenix. I was able to get my mindset in the proper place, just through reading with these guys here, instead of having to follow your dad's advice, which is, the school of learn it the hard way, the school of hard. And it would have been massive turnover, and we would have been frustrated with each other. I'm like, come on, why can't you guys get it? And then, but then I kind of said, okay, let me go back to the basic. Let me go back to where they are. And once we did that, once I did that, it was pretty smooth. And then I always made a point of, hey, I read a book, I share a book. So.
Right. I think it's another highlight right there that I'm going to repeat. You said it was on you to connect with them. I think so often it's easy for us to blame them, and I always share this when we talk to the groups of the people I work with is that Napoleon's how he described the job of a leader was to shape perspectives and to give hope. And I always thought that was just a good way to describe what our job is as leaders because you put it on. He took ownership. And my highlight with the interviews, the first one with you, and the second one with you is that you take ownership, that you don't push it off on anybody else. And then the other thing, it was the relationships. I mean, the ownership and the relationships were the two things I really took away from the interviews. Rick is a fanboy. Rick said, "I love this."
Yeah, Rick's on my weekly update list. Some
Yeah.
should be redundant. So
Right. So I wanted to. I know it's 7:26, but I wanted to ask you one last question, and that is, what is on your bucket list, or do you even have a bucket list?
um, oops. One sec.
So maybe you're a new and existing leader with a strong desire to increase your efficiencies and your effectiveness. Yeah.
Hold on.
I don't know where that came from.
Okay. So my bucket list, one is I told you, just some of the running stuff, I wanted to run a marathon a month this year. And then honestly, I don't really keep too much of a bucket list. If there's something that comes up and I want to do it, then I usually, just start working towards it until I do it. But I'm a pretty simple person, I suppose.
Oh, okay. I was ready. I was ready to hear this. This exotic.
No, I mean,
I'm gonna go to Cambodia and climb trees or something. I
no,
don't know.
none of that. But I think I mean I don't. I mean, to be honest, I think if it's if I get to that point, there's something I want to do. I usually work towards it. But I think I normally keep it pretty simple.
Okay. Now, Linda said, please repeat the author. So I'm going to repeat them, Linda. 1 Minute Manager, I believe that's Kenneth Blanchard. The 13 Fatal Errors. I can't remember who that is, but if you Google it, you'll see it. It's 13 Fatal Errors of a Manager. And then he mentioned some John Maxwell. John Maxwell probably got about 60 books out there. He's one of my favorite authors. I got probably more books by him than anybody else.
Yeah, and I would say I thought Stephen Covey was always good.
Oh.
The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it reads a little bit like a textbook, but it is that the first half of it's awesome. If you want to, probably the best management book I ever read was First Break All the Rules. And
okay.
Did you read that?
I have it on the shelf. I've never read it.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. And it just talks about, what it's written by Buckingham and Kaufman, as who wrote it. And they work with Gallup. And so they had access to, tens of thousands of surveys through Gallup. And it's, I would say it's probably the best for somebody who's already a manager. It's probably the best management book there is, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can do this again. I wanted to end it by letting everybody know, really appreciate their participation in what our next 5 Facebook Lives are going to be. The next one is This Generation, which, I can't wait to do this one. The week 2 is Vision Driven. Week 3 is Work. It is our savior. Work ... It is our savior. Week 4 is Capacity, how to increase it. And then week 5 is There are only 2 wolves. There are only 2 wolves. So really appreciate it, RD. It means a lot to me. Very impactful. What I love about these is that we record them. So it's going to be recorded and it's going to be in the archives, so very excited about that.
It's in the Ethernet now. It's in the cloud. It lives forever.
In the cloud, right? So we always end it by telling people, be intentional. Oh, let me make sure I read all the comments. Great interview. Thanks, RD, from Alec. Ann Boykin, very nice. I'll be sharing. Let's see. And then Ann said, thank you. Karen, excellent. Said, excellent. So really appreciate it. And I'll be talking to you. I'm going to call you right after this is over just to thank you. But, all right.
Well, you just did. So
All right.
of course you're always welcome. I always appreciate your tenacity, and I think since I've known you, you've spoken of Elevate, and so that's you're a good testimonial on if you want something, just persevere and keep working towards it, and if you do the right stuff and the right work, it kind of comes together. So you're a nice example of that. So
I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
absolutely.
Well, you have a great evening, everybody. Thank you for coming on. If you have any questions, go to info@wemustelevate.com. You can always go to that site. Some of you guys, you got some of my number. You can text me. But I appreciate you guys coming on. We can see you next week. Thanks a lot.
All right. See you, Curtis.
Thank you. Bye.
See you, Shar.
Bye.